Marcus Rivera had been struggling to make ends meet for months, his construction job barely covering rent and groceries for him and his 8-year-old daughter, Sofia. That Tuesday evening, driving home through the worst storm the city had seen in years, he never imagined that stopping for a stranger would transform their entire future. The elderly man shivering in the rain outside the grocery store looked fragile, desperate, and completely alone. But Marcus had no idea he was about to help one of the most powerful men in the automotive industry. What started as a simple act of kindness during a thunderstorm would lead to an invitation that would change everything. A phone call that would leave Marcus speechless, and keys to an empire he never dreamed he could own. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button for more real, emotional, life-changing stories like this, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The windshield wipers of Marcus Rivera's 15-year-old Honda Civic struggled against the torrential downpour that had been pounding the city for the past hour. Lightning illuminated the dark streets in brief, brilliant flashes, followed by thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the buildings around him. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white as he navigated through the flooded intersections, his mind focused on getting home to his daughter Sofia, who was waiting for him at their small apartment. At 32, Marcus had learned to weather many storms, both literal and metaphorical. The past 3 years since his wife Elena's death in a car accident had been a constant battle to keep his head above water. His job as a construction foreman paid enough to cover the basics, but there was never anything left over for extras, never enough to give Sofia the life he wished he could provide. Every month was a careful calculation of bills versus income, every unexpected expense a potential disaster that could send their fragile stability tumbling down. As he turned onto Maple Street, the main commercial strip of their neighborhood, Marcus noticed a figure huddled against the brick wall of Peterson's grocery store. The elderly man was completely soaked, his thin jacket offering no protection against the relentless rain. His white hair was plastered to his scalp, and even from inside his car, Marcus could see the man's shoulders shaking, whether from cold or something else entirely. Marcus's first instinct was to keep driving. He had Sofia waiting at home, probably already worried about why he was so late. The storm had delayed his commute by nearly an hour, and he knew she would be watching from their third-floor window, looking for his headlights in the parking lot below. But as another flash of lightning revealed the desperation in the old man's posture, something in Marcus's chest tightened with recognition of human suffering that he simply couldn't ignore. He pulled over to the curb, the Honda's worn brakes squealing slightly as he came to a stop. Rolling down his passenger window just enough to be heard over the storm, Marcus called out, "Hey, are you okay? Do you need help?" The elderly man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. Even through the rain and dim streetlight, Marcus could see that this wasn't just any homeless person seeking shelter. The man's clothes, though soaked, were well made. His posture spoke of dignity despite his current circumstances, and there was something in his eyes that suggested intelligence and depth that immediately commanded respect. "My car broke down about 6 blocks from here," the man called back, his voice carrying a slight accent that Marcus couldn't quite place. "I was trying to walk to find a phone, but this storm..." He gestured helplessly at the chaos around them. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Get in. I'll give you a ride wherever you need to go." The man approached the car cautiously, as if he wasn't quite sure he could trust this stranger's kindness. When he opened the passenger door and slid into the seat, Marcus immediately noticed several things. The man was probably in his 70s. His hands bore the calluses of someone who had done physical work despite his obviously refined bearing, and his eyes held a sharpness that suggested a mind still very much in command of Shao itself. "Thank you," the man said simply, buckling his seatbelt with hands that trembled slightly, though Marcus wasn't sure if it was from the cold or emotion. "I'm sorry to drip all over your car." "Don't worry about it," Marcus replied, turning up the heat and adjusting the vents to blow warm air toward his unexpected passenger. "I'm Marcus Rivera. Where can I take you? My name is Jonathan Harrison, the man replied, and Marcus thought he detected a moment's hesitation, as if the man was deciding how much to reveal about himself. I live about 15 minutes from here, in the Riverside Heights neighborhood. But honestly, I would be grateful just to sit somewhere warm and dry until this storm passes. I don't want to take you out of your way. Marcus knew Riverside Heights well. It was one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the city, filled with mansions and estates that he had only seen from the outside when his construction crew had worked on various projects in Towel. The area. The fact that this man lived there raised questions, but Marcus had learned long ago not to judge people by their circumstances in any given moment. Life had a way of humbling everyone eventually. It's no trouble at all, Marcus said, pulling away from the curb and heading toward Riverside Heights. I've got time. This wasn't entirely true. Sofia was waiting, and he knew she would be worried. But something about Jonathan Harrison compelled Marcus to extend this kindness. Maybe it was the man's obvious gratitude, or perhaps it was the way he sat quietly in the passenger seat, not making small talk or trying to fill the silence with meaningless chatter, but simply existing in the moment with pass. A kind of peaceful dignity. As they drove through the storm-lashed streets, Jonathan began to speak, his voice soft but clear above the sound of rain on the roof. You know, I've lived in this city for over 50 years, and I can't remember the last time a stranger stopped to help someone they didn't know. Most people would have driven right past. Marcus glanced at his passenger, noting the genuine surprise in the man's tone. I guess I just thought about how I'd want someone to help my daughter if she was ever in a situation like that. You have a daughter? Sofia. She's 8. Marcus's voice warmed as it always did when he talked about his little girl. She's probably wondering where I am right now. I'm usually home by 6, and it's almost 7:30. Jonathan was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, there was something different in his voice, a note of understanding that went deeper than casual conversation. It's not easy being a single parent. Marcus felt his throat tighten slightly. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact delivered with the certainty of someone who knew exactly what that responsibility felt like. No, it's not. But she's worth every challenge. I'm sure she is. Jonathan's response carried the weight of personal experience, and Marcus found himself wondering about this man's story, about the family and history that had led him to be walking alone in a storm at his age. They drove in comfortable silence for several minutes, the Honda's headlights cutting through the darkness as Marcus navigated the increasingly upscale neighborhoods that led to Riverside Heights. The houses grew larger and further apart, set back behind wrought iron gates and manicured lawns that even in the storm maintained an air of elegant prosperity. When they reached the address Jonathan provided, Marcus was struck by the understated grandeur of the property. The house wasn't the largest on the street, but it had a timeless elegance that spoke of wealth accumulated over decades rather than recently acquired. A circular driveway curved through perfectly maintained landscaping, leading to a colonial-style mansion with tall windows that glowed warmly against the stormy night. This is beautiful, Marcus said as he pulled up to the front entrance, genuinely impressed by the tasteful display of prosperity. Jonathan seemed almost embarrassed by the comment. It's too big for just me, honestly. My late wife Charlotte loved to entertain, so we needed the space back then. Now it mostly just echoes. There it was, the explanation for the loneliness Marcus had sensed in the man. Jonathan Harrison was a widower, like Marcus was a widower, both of them navigating life after losing the person who had made their world complete. The parallel wasn't lost on either of them, and it created an instant bond that transcended their obvious differences in economic circumstances. Well, thank you again for the ride, Jonathan said, but he made no immediate move to get out of the car. Instead, he turned to face Marcus directly, his weathered face serious. I want you to know that what you did tonight, stopping for a stranger in a storm, That kind of kindness is rare. Rarer than you might think. Marcus felt slightly uncomfortable with the praise. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, Jonathan said firmly, shaking his head. They wouldn't have. Trust me on that. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, slightly damp from the rain but still readable. I'd like to stay in touch, if that's all right with you. Maybe I could meet your daughter sometime, take you both to dinner as a proper thank you. Marcus took the card, glancing at it quickly in the dim light from the dashboard. The printing was elegant and simple. Jonathan Harrison, with a phone number and email address below. No title, no company name, nothing to indicate what Jonathan did for a living, or why he could afford to live in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. I'd like that, Marcus said sincerely. Sofia doesn't get to meet a lot of new people. We keep a pretty quiet life. Jonathan smiled, and for the first time since getting in the car, he looked completely relaxed. I understand. Sometimes quiet lives are the richest ones. After Jonathan disappeared through the heavy wooden front door of his home, Marcus sat in the driveway for a moment, processing the encounter. There had been something almost surreal about the entire experience. As if the storm had created a space outside of normal time where two strangers could connect in a way that felt both unexpected and inevitable. The drive home took him back through the city's center, past the construction sites where he spent his days managing crews and ensuring that buildings rose safely and efficiently from their foundations. It was honest work that he took pride in. But as he looked up at the gleaming office towers and luxury condominiums that dotted the skyline, Marcus couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to have the kind of resources that could make a real difference in Sofia's future. Their apartment building came into view. A modest 3-story structure that housed young families and elderly retirees, people like Marcus who worked hard but lived paycheck to paycheck. As he climbed the stairs to their second-floor unit, he could hear Sofia's voice through the door, talking to someone on the phone. When he entered, she was sitting at their small kitchen table, homework spread out in front of her, the phone pressed to her ear. He's here now, Grandma, Sofia said, looking up at Marcus with relief evident in her dark eyes. Dad, Grandma Rosa was worried about you because of the storm. Marcus took the phone, apologizing to his mother-in-law for his lateness and explaining about the traffic delays caused by the weather. As he talked, Sofia came over and hugged him around the waist, her small arms providing the comfort and grounding that always reminded him why every struggle was worthwhile. After hanging up, Marcus helped Sofia finish her math homework while she told him about her day at school. Her teacher had announced that the class would be taking a field trip to the Natural History Museum next month. But there was a fee of $35 per student that needed to be paid by the end of the week. Marcus did quick mental calculations, trying to figure out how to manage the expense without shortchanging their grocery budget or falling behind on any bills. Can I go, Dad? Sofia asked, her voice helpful but cautious. At 8 years old, she had already learned to temper her expectations, understanding without being told that money was always a consideration in their household. Of course you can go, Marcus assured her, though he was already mentally rearranging their financial priorities to make it happen. We'll make it work. Sofia's smile was radiant, and as Marcus tucked her into bed that night, reading her a chapter from the book they were working through together, he thought about Jonathan Harrison and the comfortable certainty that had surrounded the man despite his temporary predicament in the storm. What would it be like, Marcus wondered, to never have to worry about $35 for a school field trip, to be able to say yes to opportunities without having to calculate the cost? Over the next few weeks, Marcus found himself thinking about his encounter with Jonathan more often than he expected. There had been something about the man that lingered in his memory. Not just his obvious wealth and refinement, but the way he had spoken about kindness as if it were a precious commodity, rare and valuable beyond measure. About 3 weeks after the storm, Marcus was surprised to receive a phone call at work. His foreman duties kept him busy most days, managing schedules and coordinating with subcontractors, so personal calls during work hours were unusual. Marcus Rivera? The voice on the other end was familiar, cultured and warm. Mr. Harrison? Marcus felt a surge of pleasure hearing from the elderly man again. I hope I'm not interrupting your workday, but I wanted to follow up on my promise to take you and Sofia to dinner. Would this Saturday evening work for you? Marcus checked his mental calendar. Saturdays were usually reserved for household chores and spending quality time with Sofia, but the invitation was appealing. That sounds great. Sofia will be excited to meet you. Wonderful. I was thinking we could go somewhere special, but not too formal for a 8-year-old. Do you know Russo's Italian restaurant on 5th Street? Marcus knew the place by reputation. It was one of the nicer establishments in the city, the kind of restaurant where Marcus had never eaten but had driven past countless times. That sounds perfect. Excellent. 7 o'clock on Saturday. And Marcus, please don't worry about anything. This is my treat, my way of saying thank you properly. Saturday arrived with the first hints of spring in the air. And Sofia spent the afternoon trying to decide what to wear to her first dinner at a fancy restaurant. Marcus helped her choose a navy blue dress that Elena's mother had bought her for Christmas. And she practiced her table manners while Marcus cleaned up their apartment and tried to calm his own nerves about the evening ahead. Russo's turned out to be everything Marcus had imagined, elegant without being greed. Intimidating, with soft lighting and the kind of attentive service that made even Sofia feel special. Jonathan was waiting for them at a corner table, dressed in a crisp white shirt and navy blazer that made him look distinguished and approachable at the same time. You must be Sofia, Jonathan said, standing to greet them with a warm smile. Your father has told me wonderful things about you. Sofia shook his hand politely, her natural shyness evident but not overwhelming. Thank you for inviting us to dinner, Mr. Harrison. This place is really pretty. It is, isn't it? I've been coming here for years. The owner, Mr. Russo, makes the best lasagna in the city. Dinner was a revelation for Marcus in several ways. First, watching Sofia interact with Jonathan was a joy. The elderly man had a natural way with children that put her at ease almost immediately. He asked her about school, her favorite subjects, her dreams for the future, and listened to her answers with the kind of focused attention that made her feel important and heard. Second, Marcus began to understand more about Jonathan himself through their conversation. The man was clearly educated and widely traveled, but he wore his sophistication lightly, never making Marcus feel out of place or inadequate. When Sofia mentioned that she loved to draw, Jonathan's eyes lit up with genuine interest. I collect art, he told her. Not the expensive kind that hangs in museums, but pieces by local artists who love what they do. Maybe sometime you could show me some of your drawings. Really? Sofia's face glowed with excitement. I mostly draw animals and flowers, but Dad says I'm getting better at people too. I'm sure you are. Artistic talent often runs in families. Does your father draw too? Marcus laughed, shaking his head. I'm afraid my talents are more in the construction realm. I can build things, but I can't draw them. Building is its own form of art, Jonathan said thoughtfully. Creating something lasting and useful from raw materials, that takes vision and skill. What kind of construction do you do? Marcus explained his work as a foreman, describing some of the recent projects his crew had completed. A new medical office building, renovations to the city's main library, a residential complex that would provide affordable housing for young families. As he talked, he noticed Jonathan listening with the same focused attention he had given to Sofia's stories about school. It sounds like meaningful work, Jonathan commented. Creating spaces where people can live and work and heal? That's important. There was something in Jonathan's tone that made Marcus suspect the man understood the construction industry from more than just an observer's perspective, but he didn't press for details. The evening was too pleasant to complicate with probing questions. As they shared dessert, a spectacular tiramisu that made Sofia's eyes widen with delight, Jonathan turned the conversation to more personal territory.
Marcus, I hope you don't mind me asking, but Sofia mentioned that her mother passed away. That must have been incredibly difficult.
Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that always accompanied discussions of Elena's death, but Jonathan's gentle tone and obvious empathy made it easier to respond.
It was 3 years ago. Car accident on a rainy night, not unlike the storm when I met you. Sofia was only 5, and honestly, some days I still feel like I'm figuring out how to be both parents to her.
You're doing a remarkable job, Jonathan said quietly. I can see it in how confident and happy she is, how secure she feels in your love. That's not easy to achieve under any circumstances, but as a single parent, it's extraordinary.
Sofia looked up from her dessert, catching the serious tone of the adult conversation.
Dad takes really good care of me. He reads to me every night and helps with my homework and makes the best pancakes on Sunday mornings.
Jonathan smiled at her earnest testimonial. He sounds like a wonderful father.
He is, Sofia said with absolute certainty, and Marcus felt his heart swell with pride and love for this remarkable little person who had somehow maintained her joy and optimism despite the early tragedy in her life. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Jonathan walked them to Marcus's car, and before saying goodbye, he handed Sofia a small wrapped package.
Just a little something to remember our dinner together, he said as she tore off the wrapping paper to reveal a high-quality sketchbook and a set of colored pencils.
These are beautiful, Sofia exclaimed, running her hands over the smooth cover of the sketchbook.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harrison.
You're very welcome. I hope you'll fill that book with all sorts of wonderful drawings. On the drive home, Sofia chattered happily about the evening, already planning what she would draw first in her new sketchbook. Marcus found himself reflecting on Jonathan's questions about his work and the way the man had listened to his answers. There had been something almost evaluative in Jonathan's attention, as if he were gathering information for some purpose beyond simple conversation. Over the following months, Jonathan became a regular presence in their lives, though never intrusive or overwhelming. He would call occasionally to check in, sometimes inviting them for dinner or suggesting activities that Sofia might enjoy. When the Natural History Museum field trip came up, Marcus mentioned it in passing during one of their phone conversations, and Jonathan immediately offered to cover the cost. "Please, let me do this," Jonathan insisted, when Marcus tried to decline. "It would give me great pleasure to know that Sofia is having that experience." Marcus had learned to accept Jonathan's generosity gracefully, understanding that for this man, giving seemed to be as important as receiving kindness had been that night in the storm. There was never any sense of obligation or expectation attached to Jonathan's gifts, just a genuine desire to make their lives a little easier and Sofia's childhood a little richer. In June, Jonathan surprised them with tickets to the circus when it came to town, complete with front-row seats and backstage passes to meet some of the performers. Sofia was beside herself with excitement, and Marcus found himself watching Jonathan's face as much as the show, noting how the elderly man seemed to derive as much joy from Sofia's wonder as she did from the prize. Experience itself. "You really don't have to keep doing things like this," Marcus said as they walked back to the car after the show, Sofia skipping ahead of them, still buzzing with excitement about meeting the trapeze artists. "I know I don't have to," Jonathan replied. "But Marcus, I want you to understand something. Since my wife Charlotte died 5 years ago, I've been living a very solitary life. Meeting you and Sofia, being able to spend time with people who appreciate simple pleasures and genuine kindness, it's giving me something I didn't even realize I was missing. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing the weight of what Jonathan had just shared. You've given us far more than we've given you. That's where you're wrong, Jonathan said with a smile. But we don't need to keep score. Some of the best relationships in life aren't about balance, they're about abundance. When everyone gives freely, everyone receives more than they could have imagined. As summer progressed, Marcus began to notice changes in his own outlook and confidence. Jonathan's presence in their lives had created a sense of security and possibility that had been missing since Elena's death. It wasn't just the financial support, though that certainly helped. It was the knowledge that someone cared about their well-being, that they weren't navigating life's challenges entirely alone. Sofia was flourishing as well. Her artwork had improved dramatically, inspired by the encouragement and materials Jonathan provided, and her confidence in social situations had grown through their dinners and outings. She had started talking about college and career possibilities with a certainty that Marcus had never felt at her age, as if the world held unlimited opportunities rather than constant limitations. In August, Jonathan called with an unusual request. Instead of an invitation to dinner or an event, he asked if Marcus could meet him alone for lunch on a weekday. There was something different in his tone, more formal and serious than their usual conversations. They met at a quiet cafe downtown, away from both Marcus's work site and Jonathan's neighborhood. Marcus arrived first, choosing a corner table where they could talk privately, and when Jonathan entered the restaurant, Marcus immediately noticed that he was carrying a leather briefcase and looked more businesslike than Dowla Marcus had ever seen him. "Thank you for making time to meet with me," Jonathan said as he settled into his chair. "I have something important to discuss with you, and I wanted to do it properly." Marcus felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," Jonathan assured him. "Better than fine, actually. But I need to be completely honest with you about something, and I hope you'll hear me out before you make any judgments." Marcus nodded, his attention completely focused on Jonathan's words. "That night, when you picked me up in the storm, I wasn't entirely truthful about who I am," Jonathan began. "Not intentionally deceptive, you understand, but I didn't give you the complete picture." Marcus remained silent, sensing that this was a moment that required him to listen rather than respond. "My full name is Jonathan Harrison. That part was true, but what I didn't tell you is that I spent 45 years building one of the largest automotive manufacturing companies in the Midwest, Harrison Motors. Perhaps you've heard of it." Marcus felt his world tilt slightly. Harrison Motors was legendary in the region, a company that had started small and grown into a major player in the automotive industry, known for innovation and quality. Everyone in construction knew the Harrison name, if only because their trucks and equipment were considered among the best in the business. "I retired 5 years ago when Charlotte died," Jonathan continued. "Sold the company to a larger corporation and stepped away from the business world entirely. I've been living quietly ever since, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life." Marcus found his voice, though it came out slightly hoarse with surprise. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to know who you really were," Jonathan said simply. "When you're wealthy, people treat you differently. They see opportunities and connections instead of just another human being. That night in the storm, you helped me because I needed help, not because of what I might be able to do for you. That kind of genuine kindness is incredibly rare." Marcus sat back in his chair trying to process this revelation. The months of friendship, the dinners, the gifts for Sofia, all of it took on a different meaning when viewed through the lens of Jonathan's true identity. "I understand if you feel deceived," Jonathan said, clearly reading Marcus's expression. "But I hope you can also understand why I needed to know who you were before I could tell you who I am."
I'm not angry, Marcus said slowly, working through his emotions in real time. Just surprised, and maybe a little overwhelmed. Harrison Motors is a huge company. It was, Jonathan corrected. Now, it's part of Continental Automotive, and I'm just a retired old man who happened to be caught in the storm one night. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of this revelation settling between them. Marcus found himself thinking about all the times Jonathan had asked questions about his work, his dreams, his challenges as a single parent. Those conversations took on new significance now. There's more, Jonathan said, opening his briefcase and pulling out a stack of documents. The reason I wanted to meet with you today, the reason I felt I needed to be completely honest about my background, is because I have a proposition for you. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. What kind of proposition? 6 months ago, I purchased a small manufacturing facility here in the city. It was a company that made automotive parts. But they went out of business during the pandemic. The building, the equipment, everything is sitting there waiting for someone with vision and integrity to bring it back to life. Jonathan pushed the documents across the table toward Marcus. I want that someone to be you. Marcus stared at the papers without touching them. I don't understand. I'm a construction foreman, not a business owner. I don't know anything about manufacturing. You know more than you think, Jonathan said firmly. You understand how to manage people, how to ensure quality work gets done on time and within budget. You understand the importance of safety and precision. Most importantly, you have the character and work ethic that can't be taught. Marcus finally picked up the documents, scanning through what appeared to be business plans, financial projections, and legal papers. The numbers were staggering, representing more money than he had ever imagined having access to. I can't accept this, Marcus said, pushing the papers back toward Jonathan. It's too much. I don't deserve this. That's exactly why you do deserve it, Jonathan replied, refusing to take the documents back. Marcus, I've spent the past several months watching how you handle responsibility, how you make decisions, how you treat people. I've seen you prioritize Sofia's needs above your own wants. Work extra hours to make sure your construction crews have what they need to do their jobs safely. Go out of your way to help the stranger in a storm. Those aren't common qualities. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Jonathan was offering. But why me? There must be experienced business people who would be better suited for this. Probably, Jonathan acknowledged. But experience can be gained. Character can't be manufactured. I've seen too many businesses fail because the people running them cared more about profit than people, more about shortcuts than quality. You wouldn't make those mistakes? Marcus looked down at the documents again, seeing his own future, and Sofia's reflected in the financial projections and business plans. The opportunity was beyond anything he had ever dreamed possible, but it was also terrifying in its scope and responsibility. I need time to think about this, Marcus said finally. Of course you do. Take all the time you need. But Marcus, I want you to know that this isn't charity. This is an investment in someone I believe in. Someone I trust to build something meaningful and lasting. Jonathan stood to leave, but before going, he placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Whatever you decide, our friendship doesn't change. You and Sofia will always be important to me, regardless of whether you accept this offer. That evening, Marcus found himself pacing their small apartment while Sofia worked on homework at the kitchen table. The documents from Jonathan were spread across his bed, representing possibilities he had never allowed himself to imagine. Starting his own business, being his own boss, having the resources to provide Sofia with every opportunity she could ever want. But the fear was overwhelming too. What if he failed? What if he wasn't capable of running a manufacturing company? What if he lost everything Jonathan was offering to invest in him? Dad, you're making the floor squeak, Sofia observed without looking up from her math problems.
Marcus realized he had been pacing for nearly an hour, lost in his thoughts about Jonathan's offer. He sat down across from Sofia, watching her work with the same focused concentration she applied to everything she cared about.
Sofia, what would you think if we had to make some big changes in our lives?
She looked up, pencil poised over her worksheet.
What kind of changes?
Marcus chose his words carefully, not wanting to raise expectations or fears unnecessarily. What if Dad had the chance to start his own business, but it would mean taking some risks and working really hard to make it successful?
Sofia considered this question with the seriousness she brought to all important discussions. Would we still live together?
Of course. Would you still read to me at night? Always.
Would it make you happy?
Marcus felt his throat tighten at the directness of her question.
I think it might make it possible for me to give you more opportunities, more choices about your future. Sofia nodded thoughtfully. Then you should do it. You work really hard already, and you're really good at making sure things get built right. I bet you'd be good at having your own business too.
Her simple confidence in his abilities was both humbling and inspiring. That night, after Sofia was asleep, Marcus called Jonathan.
I've been thinking about your offer,
Marcus said when Jonathan answered the phone.
And?
I'm scared, Marcus admitted.
Terrified, actually. But I think that might be a good sign. If it wasn't scary, it probably wouldn't be worth doing.
Jonathan was quiet for a moment.
Does that mean you're willing to try? I want to try, but I need to understand exactly what I'd be getting into, what the expectations are, what happens if things don't work out. Fair enough. Can you take a day off work this week? I'd like to show you the facility, introduce you to some people who can help answer your questions.
They arranged to meet on Thursday morning at the manufacturing plant Jonathan had purchased. Marcus took a personal day from his construction job, telling his supervisor he had a family matter to attend to. In a way, it was true. This decision would affect his family more than anything else he had ever done. The Harrison manufacturing facility was located in an industrial park on the outskirts of the city, a modern building surrounded by other businesses that service the automotive and construction industries.
As Marcus pulled into the parking lot, he was struck by the professional appearance of the property. Well-maintained grounds and a building that looked capable of housing serious manufacturing operations. Jonathan was waiting for him at the front entrance, along with two other people Marcus didn't recognize. A woman in her 50s wearing a business suit and carrying a tablet, and a man about Marcus's age dressed in work clothes that suggested he was familiar with manufacturing environments.
Marcus, I'd like you to meet Sarah Chen. She's a business consultant who specializes in manufacturing startups. And Mike Rodriguez, he's the plant manager who's been maintaining the facility since I purchased it. Marcus shook hands of both of them, immediately appreciating Mike's firm grip and direct eye contact. Sarah's smile was professional but warm, and Marcus sensed that these were people Jonathan trusted to give honest assessments rather than simply tell him what he wanted to hear.
Shall we take a tour?
Jonathan suggested, leading them through the front entrance into what had once been the administrative offices of the previous company. The tour lasted nearly 3 hours, and by the end of it, Marcus's head was spinning with information about production capacities, supply chain logistics, quality control systems, and regulatory requirements. The facility was impressive, equipped with modern machinery and capable of producing a wide range of automotive parts and components. The previous company failed because they overextended themselves financially and couldn't adapt when their main customer changed suppliers, Sarah explained as they stood in the main production area. But the fundamentals are solid. The equipment is good, the location is excellent for shipping and receiving, and there's a built-in customer base of automotive manufacturers who need reliable suppliers. Mike added his perspective as someone who had worked in the industry for over 20 years. The key is starting small and building reputation before expanding. Focus on quality over quantity at first. Establish relationships with customers who value reliability over the lowest possible price. Marcus found himself asking questions he hadn't even known he needed to ask, about employee training, safety protocols, maintenance schedules, and dozens of other operational details that would determine success or failure. Both Sarah and Mike answered with patience and thoroughness, clearly understanding that Marcus was evaluating not just the business opportunity, but his own capability to handle the responsibility. After the tour, they gathered in the conference room that adjoined the plant floor. Jonathan spread out financial projections and business plans that had been prepared specifically for this venture, documents that represented months of research and planning. The initial investment would be approximately $2 million, Sarah began, and Marcus felt his stomach drop at the figure. That covers equipment upgrades, initial inventory, working capital for the first year, and salaries for a core staff of 12 employees. Where would that money come from? Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. From me, Jonathan said simply. As a loan that would be paid back from the profits of the business. You wouldn't own the company initially, but you would have the opportunity to buy an increasing percentage over time as the business becomes profitable. Mike leaned forward, his expression serious but encouraging. I've seen a lot of manufacturing startups, and most of them fail because the people running them don't understand the operational side of the business. But Marcus, from what Jonathan has told me about your background in construction management, you already understand the fundamentals of managing complex projects, coordinating multiple teams, ensuring quality, control, and meeting deadlines. Those skills translate directly to manufacturing. Marcus spent the next hour asking detailed questions about everything from hiring practices to insurance requirements, gradually building a picture of what his life would look like if he accepted Jonathan's offer. It would mean leaving his construction job, taking on enormous responsibility, and dedicating himself completely to making the business successful. What happens if it fails? Marcus asked finally, voicing the fear that had been gnawing at him since Jonathan first made the offer. Jonathan's expression grew serious, and he exchanged glances with Sarah and Mike before answering. If the business fails despite our best efforts, the financial loss would be mine, not yours. You would never be personally liable for the investment capital. The worst that could happen to you is that you'd need to find another job. But you'd have gained valuable experience in business management that would make you more marketable in any industry. Sarah nodded in agreement. We've structured this specifically to protect you from financial catastrophe while giving you maximum opportunity for success. It's unusual, but Jonathan insisted on these terms. Marcus looked around the conference room, taking in the faces of these three people who seemed genuinely invested in his success. The weight of their confidence in him was both humbling and motivating. I need to discuss this with Sofia, Marcus said finally. She's 8 years old, but this decision affects her future as much as mine. I don't make major choices without considering how they'll impact her. That's exactly the kind of thinking that convinced me you're the right person for this, Jonathan said with a smile. Take all the time you need. This opportunity will wait for your decision. That evening, Marcus sat down with Sofia for one of the most important conversations of their lives together. He explained Jonathan's offer in terms she could understand, talking about the opportunity to start a new kind of work that would involve managing a team of people who made parts for cars and trucks. Would you still be building things? Sofia asked, trying to connect this new possibility with the work she knew her father did. In a way, yes. Instead of building buildings, I'd be helping to build a business, making sure everything runs smoothly so that the people who work there can make good products. Sofia considered this carefully. Would we have to move? No, we could stay in our apartment if we wanted to. But eventually, if the business did well, we might be able to afford a house with a yard, maybe even a house where you could have a dog. Sofia's eyes lit up at the mention of the dog, something she had been requesting for years but that their apartment lease and budget had made impossible. Really? Really. But, Sofia, I need you to understand that this would be a big change for both of us.
I probably have to work longer hours sometimes. At least at first while I'm learning how to run the business. And there's always a chance it might not work out. Sofia was quiet for several minutes, and Marcus could see her working through the implications of what he had told her. Finally, she looked up at him with the same serious expression she wore when tackling difficult homework problems. "Dad, do you remember when I was learning to ride my bike without training wheels?" Marcus nodded, recalling the afternoon in the park when Sofia had fallen repeatedly but kept getting back up, determined to master the skill. "I was really scared that I'd fall and get hurt, but you told me that sometimes the best things in life require us to be brave, even when we're scared. You said that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do the right thing, even when you are afraid." Marcus felt his eyes begin to water as Sofia continued. "I think you should take Mr. Harrison's offer. You're the smartest, hardest working person I know, and if he believes you can do it, then I believe you can do it too. Besides, you always tell me that we're a team, and teams stick together no matter what happens." The next morning, Marcus called Jonathan before leaving for his construction job. "I've made my decision," Marcus said. "I want to accept your offer. I want to try to build something meaningful with the opportunity you're giving me." Jonathan's voice carried obvious pleasure and relief. "I'm so glad, Marcus. I truly believe this is going to be the beginning of something special." The transition from construction foreman to manufacturing business owner took place over the course of 6 weeks. Marcus gave proper notice at his construction job, recommending one of his most experienced crew leaders to take over his responsibilities. His supervisor was sorry to see him go, but supportive of his decision to pursue a new opportunity. During those 6 weeks, Marcus spent every evening and weekend at the manufacturing facility, learning the systems and processes that would become his daily reality. Mike Rodriguez proved to be an invaluable teacher, patient and thorough, as he explained everything from production scheduling to quality control procedures. Sarah Chen worked with Marcus to develop a business plan that was both ambitious and realistic, identifying potential customers and creating strategies for building the company's reputation in the competitive automotive parts market. She also helped him understand the financial aspects of running a business, from cash flow management to tax obligations. Jonathan remained involved but not intrusive, available for consultation and guidance, but clearly committed to letting Marcus make his own decisions about how to run the company. It was a delicate balance that demonstrated Jonathan's respect for Marcus's capabilities and his understanding that true leadership couldn't be imposed from outside. The hardest part of the transition was telling Sofia that their daily routine would be changing significantly. Instead of coming home at 6 o'clock every evening, Marcus would often be working until 7 or 8, at least during the startup phase. They arranged for Sofia to stay with her grandmother Rosa on the days when Marcus couldn't pick her up from school, and Rosa was thrilled to have more time with her granddaughter. On the day that Harrison Manufacturing officially reopened for business, Marcus arrived at the facility before dawn, his stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and terror. The 12 employees that had been hired to staff the initial operation were scheduled to arrive at 7 o'clock, and Marcus wanted to be there to greet each of them personally. Mike had helped with the hiring process, selecting experienced workers who understood the automotive parts industry and were excited about the opportunity to be part of a startup company. As Marcus watched them arrive and begin preparing for the first day of production, he was struck by the weight of responsibility he had accepted. These people were depending on him to make decisions that would affect their livelihoods and their family's security. The first month was a whirlwind of challenges and small victories. Equipment breakdowns that required immediate problem solving, quality control issues that demanded attention to detail, customer service situations that tested Marcus's ability to maintain professional relationships under pressure. There were days when Marcus went home exhausted and wondered if he had made a terrible mistake, but there were also days when everything clicked perfectly
and he could see the potential for real success. Sofia proved to be remarkably adaptable to their new schedule. She took pride in her father's new role as a business owner, telling her classmates and teachers about the manufacturing company with obvious excitement. When Marcus brought her to the facility on weekends to catch up on paperwork, she would sit in the conference room with her sketchbook, drawing pictures of the machinery and the workers, creating her own visual record of this new chapter in their lives. Jonathan visited the facility regularly, but always as an observer rather than a manager. He would walk through the production areas, chatting with employees and asking questions about their work, but he never contradicted Marcus's decisions or tried to impose his own ideas about how things should be done. His presence was supportive rather than supervisory, and Marcus gradually began to feel confident in his role as the company's leader. 3 months after the business reopened, Marcus received their first major order from a regional automotive manufacturer. The contract was worth nearly $500,000 and would require the company to expand production significantly. It was both a tremendous opportunity and a significant challenge, testing every system and process they had put in place.
"This is exactly what we hoped would happen,"
Sarah told Marcus as they reviewed the contract terms.
"But it's also going to push us to our limits. Are you ready for that level of intensity?"
Marcus thought about the question seriously. The past 3 months had already tested his capabilities in ways he hadn't anticipated, but he had discovered reserves of energy and determination that he hadn't known he possessed. More importantly, he had built a team of employees who shared his commitment to quality and excellence. "I think we're ready," Marcus said. "But I want to make sure we don't compromise our standards just to meet higher volume demands. I'd rather grow slowly and maintain our reputation than expand too quickly and risk our quality." The decision to accept the large contract while maintaining their quality standards required hiring additional employees and investing in upgraded equipment. Jonathan approved the necessary capital expenditures without hesitation, trusting Marcus's judgment about what the business needed to succeed. As autumn arrived, Marcus found himself settling into a rhythm that felt sustainable and rewarding. The morning panic attacks that had characterized his first weeks as a business owner had been replaced by a calm confidence in his ability to handle whatever challenges arose. He had learned to delegate effectively, trusting his team to manage their responsibilities while keeping himself available for guidance and decision-making. Sofia's school schedule allowed her to visit the manufacturing facility more frequently, and she had become something of a mascot for the employees. They would show her their work, explain the different processes involved in manufacturing automotive parts, and listen to her ideas about how things could be improved. Her presence reminded everyone that they were part of something bigger than just a business. They were contributing to a family's future and a community's economic health. One evening in November, as Marcus was finishing up some paperwork in his office, Jonathan knocked on the doorframe and asked if he had a few minutes to talk.
"Of course,"
Marcus said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "What's on your mind?" Jonathan settled into the chair with the careful movements of someone who was beginning to show his age, but his eyes were alert and engaged. "I wanted to talk to you about the future of the company, about what happens next." Marcus felt a familiar flutter of nervousness. "Is there a problem?" "Quite the opposite," Jonathan said with a smile. "The business is performing better than our most optimistic projections. You've exceeded every expectation I had when I first made this offer to you." Marcus felt a surge of pride at Jonathan's words. The approval of this man who had built his own manufacturing empire meant more to him than any financial success. "I think it's time we discuss the ownership transition we talked about when you first accepted this opportunity," Jonathan continued. "You've proven that you can run this company successfully, and I think you've earned the right to own a significant portion of it." Jonathan pulled out a document folder and placed it on Marcus's desk. "I'd like to transfer 40% ownership of Harrison Manufacturing to you, effective immediately. No payment required, no strings attached. You've earned it through your work and leadership." Marcus stared at the folder, unable to process what Jonathan was telling him. 40% ownership of a company that was generating millions of dollars in revenue seemed impossible, too generous to be real. "I can't accept this," Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's too much." "Marcus, let me tell you something about wealth and success that I learned over 45 years in business," Jonathan said, his tone becoming more serious. "Money is just a tool. It's meaningless unless it's used to create something valuable, something that improves people's lives. This company isn't just generating profits, it's providing good jobs for people who need them, creating products that keep vehicles running safely, contributing to the economic health of our community. That's what makes it valuable." Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes intense with conviction. "But more than that, you've created something I never managed to achieve in all my years running Harrison Motors. You've built a company culture where people genuinely care about their work and each other. I've watched your employees, seen how they respond to your leadership, how they take pride in what they're producing. That's not something that can be bought or manufactured. It's something that comes from the character of the person in charge." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the weight of Jonathan's words and the magnitude of what was being offered. "What about the other 60%? "I'll retain that for now, but with the understanding that you'll have the opportunity to purchase additional ownership as the company continues to grow and generate profits. My goal is for you to eventually own this company outright, to have something you can pass on to Sofia if she's interested, or sell if she chooses a different path." That night, Marcus sat in Sofia's room after reading her bedtime story, watching her sleep, and thinking about the transformation their lives had undergone in less than a year. From struggling to pay for school field trips to owning nearly half of a successful manufacturing company seemed like something that happened to other people, not to single fathers who had been just trying to make ends meet. The legal transfer of ownership took several weeks to complete, involving lawyers and accountants and a mountain of paperwork that made Marcus's head spin. But when it was finished, Marcus Rivera was officially a business owner, with all the responsibilities and opportunities that title entailed. The first thing Marcus did with his new status was to implement a profit-sharing program for all employees. He had remembered his own years of working for construction companies where the owners prospered while the workers struggled, and he was determined to create a different kind of business culture. "Everyone who contributes to our success should benefit from that success," Marcus announced at the company meeting where he explained the new program. "We're not just colleagues, we're partners in building something that can provide security and opportunity for all of our families." The response from the employees was overwhelmingly positive, and Marcus noticed an immediate increase in productivity and engagement. People began suggesting improvements to processes, volunteering for additional responsibilities, and taking ownership of problems instead of just reporting them. As winter approached, Marcus found himself thinking more and more about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A simple decision to help a stranger during a storm had transformed not just his own life, but the lives of his daughter, his employees, and their families. It was a reminder that small acts of kindness could have consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine. The company's success continued to exceed expectations throughout the winter months. New contracts were signed with additional automotive manufacturers. Production capacity was expanded again, and the workforce grew to nearly 30 employees. Marcus began to feel confident that Harrison Manufacturing would not just survive but thrive in the competitive automotive parts market. In February, almost exactly 1 year after that stormy night when he had first met Jonathan, Marcus received a phone call that would once again change everything. "Marcus, this is Jonathan. I need to see you as soon as possible. Can you come to my house this evening?" There was something in Jonathan's tone that made Marcus's stomach tighten with concern. "Of course. Is everything all right? We'll talk when you get here. Can you come alone?" Marcus arranged for Sofia to stay with her grandmother and drove to Jonathan's house in Riverside Heights, his mind racing with possibilities about what could be so urgent. When Jonathan answered the door, Marcus immediately noticed that the older man looked tired and somehow smaller than usual. "Thank you for coming," Jonathan said, leading Marcus into his study, a room Marcus had never seen before. The walls were lined with bookshelves and photographs that chronicled Jonathan's long career in the automotive industry. And Marcus found himself looking at images of factories, award ceremonies, and handshakes with people who were obviously important figures in business and politics. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully before you respond," Jonathan began, settling into a leather chair that looked like it had been his favorite spot for many years. Marcus sat across from him, noting the formal tone and the careful way Jonathan was choosing his words.
3 months ago, I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It's advanced, and the doctors have told me that I probably have 6 months to a year left.
Marcus felt as if the air had been knocked out of his lungs. "Jonathan, I'm so sorry. Are you getting treatment? What can I do to help?" Jonathan held up a hand to stop the flow of questions.
"I'm getting the best possible medical care, but we both know that this particular diagnosis doesn't often have happy endings. I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. I'm telling you because it affects the future of AS.
Harrison Manufacturing. Marcus sat in stunned silence, trying to process the implications of what Jonathan was saying. "I've been working with my lawyers and accountants to finalize the transfer of my remaining 60% ownership in the company to you. I want to make sure that transition happens while I'm still alive and able to ensure it's done properly."
"Jonathan, you don't have to do this. We can find other ways to handle the situation."
"Marcus, there is no other way. You are the only person I trust to continue building what we've started together. The company needs stable leadership, and the employees need to know that their jobs are secure. More than that, I need to know that something I've invested my time and energy in will continue to create value for people who deserve it."
Jonathan stood up and walked to his desk, returning with another folder of documents.
"This represents complete ownership of Harrison Manufacturing, the building, the equipment, the contracts, everything. There are no debts, no obligations, no strings attached. It's yours, free and clear." Marcus stared at the folder, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered and the tragic circumstances that made it necessary. "I don't know what to say. Say you'll take care of the people who work there. Say you'll continue to build something meaningful and lasting. Say you'll remember that businesses exist to serve communities, not just to generate profits for owners." Marcus looked up at Jonathan, seeing not just the successful businessman he had come to know, but a man who was facing his own mortality with grace and dignity, more concerned about the future of others than his own breath. "Fate. I promise you all of that," Marcus said quietly. "But Jonathan, I also promise you that you'll always be remembered as the founder of what we're building. Your name will stay on the company, your values will guide our decisions, and your legacy will live on through the work we do." Jonathan's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time since Marcus had known him, the older man's composure cracked slightly. "Thank you, Marcus. That means more to me than you could possibly know." The legal transfer of ownership took place over the following month, with Jonathan insisting on handling all the associated costs and paperwork. Marcus found himself in the surreal position of owning a manufacturing company worth several $1,000,000, while simultaneously preparing for the loss of the man who had made it all possible. Jonathan's condition deteriorated more quickly than the doctors had initially predicted. By April, he was spending most of his time at home, with hospice care providers helping to manage his pain and ensure his comfort. Marcus visited him regularly, bringing updates about the company's progress and seeking advice about business decisions, but their conversations increasingly focused on personal rather than professional matters. "I want you to know that meeting you and Sofia has been one of the greatest gifts of my life," Jonathan told Marcus during one of their last lengthy conversations. "After Charlotte died, I thought my life was essentially over. That I was just marking time until I could join her. But watching you build something meaningful, seeing Sofia grow into such a remarkable young woman, it's reminded me that life continues, that our actions can have positive impacts long after we're gone. Marcus struggled to find words adequate to express his gratitude and grief. You gave us a future we never could have imagined. Sofia will have opportunities I never dreamed of being able to provide for her. That's your legacy, Jonathan. The lives you've changed for the better. Jonathan Harrison passed away peacefully in his sleep on a quiet Tuesday morning in May. Marcus learned about his death from Jonathan's attorney, who called to inform him that he had been named as the executor of Jonathan's estate and that there were additional provisions in the will that would require his attention. The funeral was held at the city's oldest and most beautiful church, and Marcus was amazed by the number of people who came to pay their respects. Business leaders, employees from Jonathan's various companies over the years, community members whose lives had been touched by his philanthropy, and dozens of people whose stories Marcus had never heard but who obviously felt a deep connection to the man who had shown him such unexpected kindness. Marcus spoke at the service, sharing the story of how he had met Jonathan during a storm and how that encounter had changed both of their lives. He talked about Jonathan's belief in the power of kindness to create unexpected opportunities, his commitment to building businesses that served communities rather than just enriching owners, and his understanding that true wealth came from relationships and contributions rather than bank account balances.
Sofia cried during the funeral, grieving for the man who had become like a grandfather to her, who had encouraged her artwork and believed in her potential with unwavering certainty. After the service, she asked Marcus if they could visit Jonathan's grave regularly, and Marcus promised they would always remember the man who had transformed their lives. The reading of Jonathan's will revealed additional surprises that left Marcus once again overwhelmed by the older man's generosity. In addition to the manufacturing company, Jonathan had left substantial funds in trust for Sofia's education, ensuring that she would be able to attend any college she chose and pursue whatever career path interested her. He had also made significant donations to local charities and established a scholarship fund for children from single-parent families. But perhaps the most meaningful bequest was a letter Jonathan had written to Marcus, to be delivered after his death. In it, Jonathan explained his philosophy about wealth and responsibility, about the importance of using success to create opportunities for others, and about the legacy he hoped Marcus would continue to build. Wealth is not about accumulation, Jonathan had written. It's about circulation. Money that sits in accounts helps no one, but money that flows through businesses, creates jobs, supports families, and builds communities has the power to transform lives in ways that compound over generations. You have shown me that you understand this instinctively, and I trust you to continue building something that serves purposes larger than personal gain. Over the following months, Marcus threw himself into expanding Harrison Manufacturing while maintaining the values and culture that Jonathan had helped him establish. The company continued to grow, adding new product lines and serving additional customers throughout the Midwest. The profit-sharing program was expanded, and Marcus implemented additional benefits for employees, including health insurance, retirement contributions, and educational assistance for their children. Sofia thrived in their new circumstances, excelling in school and developing her artistic talents with the confidence that came from knowing her future was secure. She often spoke about Jonathan to her friends and teachers, sharing stories about the man who had believed in her father's potential and changed their family's trajectory through a simple act of kindness. As the first anniversary of Jonathan's death approached, Marcus found himself reflecting on the year that had passed and the responsibilities he had inherited. Harrison Manufacturing now employed over 50 people, generated millions of dollars in annual revenue, and had earned a reputation for quality and reliability that was bringing in new customers regularly. But more than the financial success, Marcus was proud of the company culture they had created. Employees genuinely cared about their work and each other,
productivity was high because people felt valued and respected, and the business was contributing to the economic health of the entire community. It was exactly what Jonathan had envisioned when he first offered Marcus this opportunity. On the anniversary of Jonathan's death, Marcus and Sofia visited his grave, bringing flowers and spending time remembering the man who had touched their lives so profoundly. As they stood in the peaceful cemetery, Sofia asked a question that had been on her mind for months. "Dad, do you think Mr. Harrison knew that helping him that night in the storm would lead to all of this?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I don't think he could have known exactly what would happen, but I think he understood that kindness creates possibilities. He told me once that the best relationships in life aren't about keeping score. They're about abundance, about everyone giving freely so that everyone receives more than they could have imagined." Sofia nodded thoughtfully. "So when you helped him, you weren't trying to get anything back. You were just being kind." "And when he helped us, he wasn't expecting anything back either. He was just being kind, too." "That's exactly right," Marcus said, marveling at his daughter's ability to understand complex concepts with such clarity. "Then maybe the real lesson isn't about the business or the money," Sofia continued. "Maybe it's about how being kind to people can create a chain reaction that helps lots of people you don't even know." Marcus looked down at his daughter, struck by the wisdom in her words. At 9 years old, Sofia had grasped something that many adults never understood. That individual acts of kindness could ripple outward in ways that transformed communities and created opportunities for people who might never know the original source of their good fortune. As they walked back to their car, Marcus thought about the 50 employees who now had secure jobs because he had stopped to help a stranger in a storm. He thought about their families, their children who would have better opportunities because their parents had stable employment. He thought about the customers who relied on Harrison Manufacturing for quality products, and the chain of economic activity that flowed from their success. That evening, Marcus sat down to write a letter to be filed with his own will. A letter to be given to Sofia when she was old enough to understand the full implications of their family's story. In it, he tried to capture the lessons Jonathan had taught him about responsibility, generosity, and the power of individual choices to create positive change in the world. "The night I met Jonathan Harrison," Marcus wrote, "I made a simple decision to help someone who needed assistance. I had no idea that decision would transform our entire future, but I've learned that the most important choices we make are often the ones that seem smallest at the time. Kindness costs nothing, but can yield returns that compound over generations. Success is not about what we accumulate for ourselves, but about what we create for others. And the true measure of a life well lived is not in the wealth we leave behind, but in the positive changes we help set in motion." Years passed, and Harrison Manufacturing continued to grow and prosper under Marcus's leadership. Sofia graduated from high school as valedictorian and chose to attend college on the East Coast, studying business and art with the intention of eventually joining her father's company. The scholarship fund Jonathan had established helped dozens of children from single-parent families pursue higher education, creating a legacy of opportunity that extended far beyond the original act of kindness in a storm. Marcus never forgot the lesson of that night. That individual moments of choice could have consequences far beyond what anyone could imagine. That success carried with it the responsibility to create opportunities for others, and that the most powerful force in human society was not wealth or power, but simple kindness extended from one person to another, without expectation of return. The company that had started with a single act of compassion during a thunderstorm had become a testament to the truth that Jonathan Harrison had understood from the beginning, that the best investments are made in people, that the most profitable businesses are those that serve purposes larger than profit, and that the greatest wealth is created when success is shared rather than hoarded. In the end, Marcus Rivera's story was not just about a single father who built a successful business, but about the enduring power of human kindness to transform lives, create opportunities, and build communities that thrive across generations. It was a reminder that we never know when our smallest acts of compassion might set in motion changes that will ripple through the world long after we are gone, touching lives and creating possibilities that we could never have imagined when we first chose to simply help another human being in need.